Welcome, folks. Um, got a lot to cover today, so let me get into it. I may have to mute someone. I was going to mute me. So I want to cover a lot of different things. Uh, you might notice in the chat I put a URL, and what this is very interesting. It's a Chat GPT emotional processor. And I've used it some. A friend of mine created it, and it's awesomely good. I've been a psychotherapist for 30 years. I no longer renewed my license, but I was using it, and I found it to be better than any therapist I've ever been to. And it's free, and it's 24/7. So you can see that a lot of traditional therapy is going to go the way of AI. Currently, about 20% of people under 30 use Chat GPT as a therapist and other AI platforms. So that's something that you might want to be aware of. Um, and you can use it and see what you think. It's also a URL that you can give to clients for their emotional processing if you think that's a good idea. Um, I also want to mention a few things about uh, screening. In the training course, I gave you a long document on people fill out to uh, know their history, their background with psychedelics, etc. I always think that's a good idea for two reasons. One is it can prevent you from getting in trouble, meaning there might be something on there that you want to know about that isn't covered in the discovery section or a call. Um, so that's one thing. It also helps the client to prepare. It has a lot of questions about what do you want out of this, etc. And I think the more people kind of have skin in the game that way, the better. So that's part of it. You can also use your intuition. Have been a couple times that I have decided not to work with someone just because I felt like it wasn't a good fit, or I thought their background was a little weird. So sometimes you have to use your intuition to know if you want to work with someone. On the legality front, there's different things you can do depending on how much safety you need, how paranoid you are, etc. I have found that I can do anything and nobody's bothered by it other than people who don't like the whole idea. So I got into that whole scandal about uh, some guy wrote nasty articles about me about a year and a half ago. It didn't matter that 13 of the things he said about me were completely made up. You're allowed to do that on the internet. He did say one thing that was true, and that was I had claimed that I was a psychotherapist when I had not renewed my license for a couple of years. And that was, for some people, a very serious offense. Ends up, if I had renewed my license, being this out there, I could have gone into more trouble with the Behavioral Science Board, so I didn't. But I shouldn't have said that I was a psychotherapist. So that was something that was a good learning experience for me. Um, the reason I bring this up is because you can call yourself different things, and some are more dangerous than others. To say that you're a psychedelic coach, there is never a problem with that because coaching does not have regulation the same way therapy does. You can call yourself a little bit more risky, but not a lot, a psychedelic facilitator. I haven't seen anybody get in trouble for this, but it is uh, grabs to some people a little bit more attention because there will eventually be legal psychedelic facilitators. Right now, there is no such thing, except for in Australia and possibly Denmark. Um, so that's something that, currently you can do, but it's a little bit riskier than coach. And the third thing you can call yourself is a therapist, psychedelic therapist. If you're not a therapist, as I currently am not, that's something you shouldn't call yourself. So that's something that you might want to know about. I want to cover something I see in almost all my clients, actually, in almost everybody in the world, and that is a condition that people have that causes them immense amount of suffering, a very limited identity, and really holds them back. And I'll call that the tendency to see themselves as a victim. Um, what I see currently is that almost everybody sees himself as a victim. Uh, and I call it US, uniquely screwed. Kind of, in some sense, everybody feels that they are uniquely screwed. Even the President of the United States, who's a billionaire, most powerful person in the world, beautiful wife, etc., thinks of himself as uniquely screwed and a victim. So if he can get away with it, think of you and I who might not have money or health or whatever it is, but all your clients pretty much will come in thinking that they are uniquely screwed and a victim of something. Now we think of it personally, but really, if everybody's feeling it, it's kind of like feeling like gravity is uniquely against you. No, gravity is not uniquely against you. It's against every single thing on Earth. And because we understand the law of gravity, we adjust to it. We don't complain about it. We don't say it's hurting me. We just say, well, you got to go against gravity to get out of bed and things like that. So in this case, the gravity is this tendency nowadays for everybody to feel like they are a unjust victim or an unlucky victim of something. And when you explain this to clients, they can often see it because they're living in it. It's like everybody's living in air. Now, how to deal with it? First, I think making people aware of it, that it's kind of like the crack cocaine of emotions, meaning that it's highly addictive. And if you partake of it a little bit, you just get used to that's how you look at your life. And it keeps people very locked in a small identity. I was working with a client the other day who has not had a drink in 50 years. 50 years, that's a long time to not have a drink. And he considered himself a recovering alcoholic. And I said, no, you're not a recovering alcoholic. You're a recovering thinking you're an alcoholic. And that's a big difference because he really sees himself as a dangerous person who could fall off the wagon any second. And I said, that's really not necessary. You could change your identity to someone who overcame alcoholism, and it's not a problem for you anymore. I said, do you ever want to have a drink? No, I haven't wanted a drink for 49 years. Okay, well, then maybe that's not your issue now. So you can relate this to yourself. Like, what do you think? Like, oh, I have to always deal with this. Well, everybody has to deal with something in the world, but that doesn't mean your identity has to be tied to it. Um, the main difference between people who are enlightened, who, I have a podcast where I interview such people, and normal people, is that their identity is no longer on their personality or their life situation. Their identity is on their soul or on presence or on awareness. And that's available to us anytime. We're all aware. So you could just like say, I'm a soul or I'm awareness. You have to go into memory or your whole story about life in order to see yourself as a victim, even though that is very common. So sometimes what I do is I say, well, what other identity can you have besides a victim? Maybe you're actually a very nice, sweet person. Maybe that could be your new identity, or maybe you're great at helping people, or maybe you're an artist. So the most fundamental way, quickest way to change people is by changing their identity. And most people, their main part of their identity is on being a victim of something. Um, when people have near-death experiences, which is by far the fastest way to change people dramatically. I don't recommend it because you generally have to die and then come back to have that identity shift. But people who go through that go through a major identity shift because now they realize there is something more going on than meets the eye, and they do change their identity, and it leads to massive changes in their life. But you can do that in a smaller way by helping people put a little bit more weight of their life on identities other than how they are a victim of some problem, situation, or whatever. And during the Q&A, if you have questions about that, I'd be glad to talk about that. Next, I want to talk about a couple of techniques we haven't talked about before. And by the way, I'm not sure, but this might be the last supervision I do for a while as we go into Thanksgiving holiday season and such. If you don't get an email in a couple weeks, you'll know that that's the case. But I do hope to do this more after the first of the year. Um, So two techniques, and one I would like a demo with somebody that I can demonstrate this with. I call it the Dyad awakening technique, and some of you know I've taken different courses recently to learn the cutting edge of how to bring people to a place of peace, love, and joy. And what I've been startled to see with a couple of these courses, how good they are. You know, the technology in every area is improving, including the technology of finding inner peace. So what might have taken somebody 20 years to experience uh, 20 years ago, meditating every day and taking different workshops, now I see that people can get pretty good results, the same results in a month using some of these advanced techniques. The two I recommend the most are, and I have no financial tie to either of them. The two I recommend the most is a 45 Days to Awakening Challenge. You can look that up, 45 Days to Awakening Challenge. And the other one is called Journey, spelled Journey, Journey, and they have a website at journey.io. They both offer actually very similar techniques, and that's very interesting. You know, when people first discovered electricity, they didn't know what do you use it for? You know, does it do this? Does it do that? They had no idea. And then eventually people said, this is how it works, this is how to use it. The same thing is happening in these fields of finding inner peace, joy, and love, in that, everybody had their 2,000-year-old methods, the Buddha, Christ, all these things. Maybe that works, maybe it doesn't for you. But a lot of these places that are using data to find out what really works are finding that there's a couple of techniques that actually do work the best for almost everybody. And nobody knows those techniques because nobody's been able to make millions of dollars selling those techniques. The journey retreat's like $1,200. The 45 Day to Awakening is like $500. Um, but although thousands of people now have taken those courses and gained great results, they're not, something like a product you can buy and sell a billion of them. But they do generally now use the same four or five techniques that data show work a lot better. Most people are using methods that were invented 2,000 years ago, and they just don't work very well nowadays, whether it be yoga or vipassana or insight meditation. All of those in the data show that they work very, very poorly for most people. Not everybody, but for most people. And some of these new techniques work extremely quickly, extremely well for most people. But you do have to invest time and money in them. I tell you that because I think the more peace, love, and joy you have in your life, the better facilitator you're going to be. Um, and so I wanted to quickly mention a couple of techniques that can be useful in your facilitations and perhaps even for yourself. Although if you want to learn more, I suggest that you look into those two courses. One of the techniques would involve a volunteer. Would anybody want to raise their hand and volunteer? It's basically me just asking you a few questions. Anybody? Yeah, John, great. Let's put both of us on a thing here.
Get here. I'm
Hey,
here.
John. Good to see you. You might be
Mutual.
you might be familiar with this. I call it the Dyad Awakening.
Yeah.
It's really a social meditation. People now have such poor attention spans that they find that um, a meditation which involves someone asking them specific questions and telling them certain things is helpful. And in fact, in the journey retreat I just took, they had an AI bot doing it. So you can now do it 24/7. I do it like 5 minutes, 3 times a day. I get to a place of deep peace and love in 5 minutes, and I'm just using AI. It doesn't require a person. But in this case, I'm going to demonstrate the type of things the AI bot suggests. Okay?
Yeah, yeah.
And you can do it
Let's
with
go.
eyes open or closed. Probably eyes closed would be easier.
Uh, okay. Usually when I sit with eyes open, but
Okay,
not
that's
always.
fine too. Whatever works for you. So what are you most aware of right now in your current experience?
um, what I'm most aware of is the field of vision and my body and my puppy just came back into the room.
Uh-huh. And what part of your body might feel the most pleasant now or most relaxed?
Um, I don't know. It all feels pretty good right now.
Let's just find
My
one
feet
one
are
part
very
that.
definitely alive on the floor, and my hands are just resting on my knees
Uh-huh.
comfortably.
Uh-huh. Um, I want you to notice what it feels like in the center of your chest, and if possible, to think of something that kind of makes you smile or feel good or brings a sense of joy to you when you think about it.
Okay, got it.
Good. And when you do that, what do you notice in your chest?
A soft, gentle warmth, a kind of a benevolent inclination.
Good. Now, I want you to imagine that you can kind of melt or relax into that pleasant feeling even more.
Ah, that's delicious. Thank you.
Oh, you're
Um,
welcome.
it it tends to intensify and spread.
Great. Now, I'd like you to smile to it with your face or eyes in a way like you'd be happy to see your puppy or a good friend.
Yeah. Okay.
And what do you notice when you do that?
There's a initially subtle and gradually more vivid sense of expansiveness
Mm,
and spaciousness.
great, great. Now, with this good feeling, I want you to imagine that you can beam it or send it to someone you love.
That feels wonderful. Yeah, I can do this.
Uh-huh. Keep doing it. Maybe with a phrase, may you be happy and peaceful or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
So would you say what's the primary feeling you'd say you're feeling now?
Um, Ease, contentment, connectedness.
Uh-huh.
It's like that.
You look pretty smiley and glowy.
Yeah, I feel kind of smiley and glowy.
And do you feel it throughout your body or mostly in one part of your body?
Um, and I would say there's a varying intensity of it throughout my body, and its most intense uh, in, in my core, like in front of my spine,
Yeah.
up to my crown.
Uh-huh. Why don't you try an experiment? Imagine like you had a little knob on your hand, and the knob is now at 4 on the
Okay.
1 to 10 scale. And you're going to see if you can just turn it up to like 7 or 8 and see what that is like if you can do that.
As it goes up, there's the intensity definitely goes up. It's more tingly
Uh-huh.
in the sensations of it, and um, simultaneously there's more sense of it being in a larger container, a bigger
Mm-hmm.
space.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
Yeah, I
You
like
have a
it.
little bit of instant MDMA right there.
Yeah, it's very nice.
Okay.
Very nice. Thank you.
Thanks, John. You did great. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
So let me just say a couple things about this. You see, it doesn't need to take long. I'm basically asking certain types of questions. You know, where do you feel good? How big is it? Can you make it bigger? Can you smile into it? Can you send it to other people? All these things tend to expand good feelings. Now, in my opinion, almost everything we do is to try to avoid pain or gain pleasure. And some of our methods of doing that require years to try to have a good feeling. You know, people will spend thousands of dollars flying to Disneyland, waiting in line an hour to have a good feeling for 2 minutes. But when you have access to these feelings, or your clients have access to these feelings so quickly by kind of doing a guided meditation, but it's mostly questions. And people start to learn their recipe for how to get into expanded states of consciousness, which most people don't think is possible unless they take drugs. Well, when they can experience it on drugs and see that they can expand it even more, it shows that it is possible. And then maybe in the integration session, you can do it once again with them, or um, just get them to know that they can access these types of things and that you can too. Um, and during the Q&A, we'll have you ask any questions about that. So that's one method. That's called Dyad awakening questions, and it's a skill like any other to know what questions to ask. I thought I was uniquely good at it, and I found that the bot in the Journey retreat was actually better at it than I was, and it's an AI. So, that's pretty funny. Um, the other method that both these consciousness expanding courses have come upon is something called sinking in, which I've talked about before. It's basically a little bit what I did with John, where you're sinking into a good feeling. But one of the things that I try to find out with people is what's something that brings up a good feeling for them. Like with John, I may have mentioned, his puppy or someone he loves. And I ask people, can you remember, 3 times that you felt really good or something that makes you really happy now? For me, it's like my dogs play with each other, and that always brings a smile to my face. And there's other times, other things that always bring a smile to my face as well. A nice walk in a beautiful day in nature, or going to a concert of a group I like, etc. I'm frozen here. Hopefully you can still hear me. Uh, so
And here you are frozen.
yeah, okay. So there's various things that I and other people do to that bring a smile to their face. And you want to ask about that. And then you have people get into that and literally put a smile on their face that actually helps. And sometimes I tell people, can you get your heart to smile? And then to sink into this good feeling like you would into a hot tub. Now, the word you use to describe that could be savor the good feeling, or welcome it, or melt into it. But there's basically three things you want to do. Find what leads to a good feeling. Find uh, what blocks it, such as physical tension. I often have people do a body scan. Notice any part in your body that feels a little bit tense. Can you relax your shoulders? Just a little bit. Can you smile into your shoulders and tell them it's okay to relax? Because a relaxed body usually then can lead to a relaxed mind, and a relaxed mind where there's no mental tension then tends to open up into these good feelings. And that's a skill that if people learn that, it solves so many other problems, you know. And they don't even have to be great at it, they just have to know that's possible. So relax your body, get them into a good feeling, and then guide them to melt into the good feeling more, to relax into it. And then if they notice that they're resisting something, allow themselves to relax the resistance and to melt the resistance. Now, when people get good at this, which doesn't take that long, a lot of people, majority of people, can actually uh, enter into bliss, love, and peace states very consistently within half an hour. And when you can do that, that's really, really a life changer. And if you can teach somebody to do that, that's a life changer. So those are some simple hints. Now, in the journey retreat, they literally spend a week where you're doing drills, practicing these methods, and getting really good at them. Unfortunately, that retreat is booked up for about 5 months, but you can get on their waiting list. And somebody put the uh, URL in the chat, which is jhourney.io. Um, so those are some things that can really help you and others get to what I call a higher state of being more consistently. You know, most people think that the key to their life getting better is to solve external problems. But no matter how many problems you solve, you always have new problems until you're dead. But that's not a great solution. So you're always going to have problems. The question is really, can you, no matter what's going on in your life, access peace, love, and joy? People that can do that tend to be happier than people who are only trying to control external events to be the way they want, which is another way to peace. It just doesn't work very well. So those are some cutting edge methods. One other thing I want to mention is the advantage of props. This is something you use. You know, sitting for 5 hours with somebody is not easy. So I always have something that I'm squeezing. This is like it's called Needoh, Needoh. I talked about this, I think, in one of my training sessions. But, you know, if I'm sitting for 5 hours, I use something like this. They're not watching, it's, you know, down here, but it helps me to sit for 5 hours. The person on MDMA doesn't have a problem sitting for 5 hours. Um, the other thing I use is something called an acupressure ring. You can get these on Amazon as an acupressure ring, and this stimulates the acupressure points in your fingers, and that can help you to relax and get a little bit high while you're guiding others. So those are some good ideas. I hope that's useful. I'm going to stop the recording and we'll do some Q&A. Let's see if I can figure out how to do this. Here we are.